Our next guest on the Any Given Monday podcast is a professional triathlete with 5 Irish national championships to his name, 2 Commonwealth Games, represented Ireland across the world, and with 16 years of experience in triathlon, he now provides coaching to athletes of all levels. Oh, and one small detail I almost forgot. He is also an Olympian, competing in the Tokyo Games 4 years ago. Russell White, welcome to this week's episode of the Any Given Monday podcast. How are you getting on?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me.
I shouldn't be interviewing you, Russell. What are you doing on this podcast?
I know you guys reached out, so I'm happy.
with an intro like that, it's so impressive, and accolades like that, it's so impressive. We're gonna probably start way back when. What brought you into the world of triathlon and sport, and where did the journey start for you?
I guess probably always was a swimmer growing up, sort of through school. I sort of always say like near the end of school, it just wasn't really going where I wanted it to go. Decent enough national level, but I guess making that change sort of from sort of going to university, I was sort of thinking of looking down different avenues. Tried a triathlon for fun, just pull swim, sprint triathlon, and was maybe like 7th overall, first junior. Went into sort of talent identification day, got picked up, and I was lucky I'd already applied for Stirling University at the time, and decided then by the time I needed to like pick which university I wanted to go to, it it was my first choice because it was the home of Triathlon Scotland at the time. So I went there, and then sort of that started my triathlon career. But yeah, before that it was all just swimming from an early age, just in the water with family, and yeah, a bit of hockey on the side that sort of just kept the variety. But triathlon sort of since I've been 18 or so.
When you spend so long as a younger age, Russell, because through any sport when we're kids, it becomes your identity, when for you, probably swimming was your identity all the way up. And then college, as as you reach that age of 17, 18, and then transitioning to, well, actually, maybe I could be a triathlete. How was the transition from accepting maybe I'm not going to be what I dreamt about being in swimming to triathlon could be for me? How was that transition?
I probably got thrown in at the deep end. It was pretty quick. I took to it. I definitely got a lot of opportunities. A triathlon that I tried for the first time was probably around this time of the year in 2009. And then sort of just usual school exams, different stuff. Didn't really take it serious. Went to that talent identification day. Sort of did my AS levels sort of in the January, and was like, okay, right, well, I've sort of got picked up. People sort of within Ireland want to put me on a pathway for triathlon. And Ireland was hosting European champs in Athlone in 2010. And that just, I definitely got thrown in the deep end, because by the June or July, I was racing junior Europeans in Athlone. It might not have happened if it hadn't been based in Ireland, but I guess that's what comes from hosting big events in Ireland. And it probably like triathlon and other sports, we need to take that opportunity, because it does give us that sort of springboard. So yeah, I'd done junior Europeans and junior worlds within my first year. So by September, I'd done both. So I probably didn't even have time to look back at much of a transition. It was just definitely in at the deep end, but just took it in my stride and just seeing it as a privilege, and just sort of ran with it. And I guess then when I went to Stirling, and it was a British triathlon setup that was a bit more sort of serious, and the guys were a bit more experienced within triathlon than me, I was just immersed in it, and just ran with it from there.
So your third race ever, your third triathlon ever, is that European Championships. Your first European Championships, your first elite race. Are you thinking at this stage, right? You're here already. What were you thinking about the 5 rings, the Olympic stuff like that, the Olympics and stuff like that, or was it just I'm in the middle of it now. I'm just gonna see how far this takes me.
Yeah, I think the Olympics were always a dream, from the very start, and I guess I just didn't even know sort of what sport that was going to be. Like I've done a talk in schools before where I was doing my GCSEs, sort of 16, and someone comes in, sort of team building type of, you're on study leave. And the task that they had was like a bit of a cheap clam shaped alarm clock. And it was goal setting, sort of just the usual. If you say it out loud, there's more chance of it happening. You write it down, kind of thing. There was like, but if you sort of believe it and make it, then there's even more chance of like your sort of goals and aims happening. And I guess the task was based on, got Play-Doh, built it in the lid of the clam clock. And I think it was an analogy of like, you always have time to achieve your goals. Don't close over the clock 'cause it crushes your dreams, type of thing. Just simple stuff like that. But that was at 16, like, and I made the Olympic rings out of Play-Doh in that clock. And I guess I was just sort of swimming at a national level, playing hockey, sort of Ulster under 16s at the time, but probably didn't even know about a triathlon. And I guess that sort of, when I look back, it was like, okay, really, Olympics was a sort of childhood dream that everybody says, that then I guess I was able to look back. And the funny thing is, like, my mum took that thing quite serious, that even when I was at uni, she would always change the battery because she
Keep
didn't
the clock
want
going.
to keep the clock going.
Brilliant.
So the clock still ticks. So it's just a nice thing. I brought it into primary school post Olympics to be like, you know, if you set your mind to it, the usual sort of cliches of like that sort of stuff is possible. But I guess it's sort of something that I keep, that, yeah, it was a long term goal, and I'm privileged to sort of say that I did achieve it.
You say they say if you can see it, you can be it. Obviously, you've been around the pool a lot. You played hockey, so you're around team sports. You're obviously super fit. Um, the transition to uni, obviously, the being picked up, the Europeans, your third ever triathlon, which is impressive. But to go to a uni where you're dealing with people who've been on bikes, who have been running, and getting coached in that kind of element, did you feel a little bit behind at the start? Were you just holding on to people's coattails for a little while till you learned the percentages that they've learned, probably over doing junior from the ages of 12 all the way up? Particularly when you look at British triathlon, they get into it a lot younger and they specialize a lot younger. How was that for you? And obviously, you're very competitive. So, what was it like to transition there and learn the tricks of the trade of the other two sports? Because you're not just good at one, you have to be excellent at all three.
Yeah. I guess it was sort of quite difficult in a sense that you're sort of going over, and maybe there was a lot of guys with more experience, and but I'm going, well, I've actually been the junior Europeans and junior worlds already. I'm probably looking at them going, you know, you guys are still above me at this stage. But it was a privilege of being in a centre and immersed in triathlon. Just that, being able to cater for quite a few ranges, learning, like, I brought something to the pool at the time. I was then had a steady growth within the bike, and running was probably the weakness at the time. I went over there. I found out probably the day before that Worlds, and it would have been my freshers week that I maybe missed because of World Champs, and I had a double stress fracture in my lower leg, and it was basically the physio had a golf ball sized egg on, like, under my sock line, and the physio was like, "You definitely fractured it. Like, isn't you're not going to do any more harm? Just run tomorrow." So I did go back. I missed. I didn't run. That was September 2010. I didn't run until May 2011. But that was just far too much too soon. And it was a case of, I can't be injured. I've only been doing it, less than a year. Pure naivety. And I think that's what carried me through that first couple of years. But in hindsight, going there, not being able to run, allowed me then to pick up the bike, focus on that, learn to manage the load of swimming along with the biking and the rehab for the running. So it wasn't just a straight in full try. It was, I guess, then managed through that injury and stuff. So it helped in that sense. But yeah, it was just that being immersed in a center definitely helped.
A lot of times an injury like that, when you seem to be starting, you've transitioned from pool, then you picked up an injury, and now it's, I can't do one of these sports, I'm on the program. That could be quite daunting as an 18, 19-year-old, trying to make an impression, trying to develop yourself. But you've obviously, with hindsight, taken the positives. You focus on what you could do. But was there any part of you that probably struggled with that element?
I think the whole mix of like your first year uni, new sport, new location, and just even the fact that, you know, the luxury of triathlon for the first time is you, there's so many elements that one injury actually you have to look at the as a blessing that you cannot take that opportunity to improve the other two. Do you know, if it was a swimmer and you have a shoulder injury and that's all it was doing, then, maybe it would have sort of knocked me back a little. But you're rocking up to the pool every morning with the guys, you're rolling out with the bike, yeah, you're maybe not doing the runs and stuff, but you were joining them at the track, doing your rehab stuff, still immersed in it. So yeah, probably too laid back at the time that, it didn't catch me off guard that, you know, yeah, I guess that was one sort of trait that kind of helped me see that through.
By the time you get to 2016, the running's doing okay because that's your first of 5 national championships from there. Your Olympic nationals elite draft. How did that feel getting your first national championship?
Yeah, that was huge. And I think it's maybe, don't quote me on the fact it's the last time. There hasn't been one, maybe a year after, but there hasn't been too many Olympic distance draft legal. So, and that was the first year that there was a big push to get draft legal racing in Ireland. Around that time, bit of a series in Phoenix Park, awful weather, good swim, breakaway with Chris Minton, another great international. Yeah, we sort of stayed away and then sort of good solid 10K run. That probably springboarded me there and did give me a lot of belief. At the time, I was staying down in Dublin for about 2 or 3 weeks leading into that, training with Brian Keane at the time, getting ready for Rio. And I was sort of swimming with him and his squad out of the NSC. And I was like, well, I'll make it worth it and do national champs basically at the end of a bit of a mini camp. But yeah, it just definitely gave me a huge amount of confidence that sort of springboarded a lot of bigger international races off the back of that.
When you train with these guys, like obviously you know each other intimately because you'll be on national camps, you'll be on international camps, you may have even been in the same university. When it comes to racing strategy, even at the younger age, when you started to develop your triathlon racing ability, how do you develop the competitiveness with guys you've been training with, training against, and how do you get into each other's heads, I suppose, and stay out of each other's heads, because they could be your friends as soon as you finish the race, but at the same time, you all want to win.
Yeah, I don't think like triathlon's actually, a fairly friendly sport. You don't get that rivalry that you sort of get in like, it's not getting you're not getting away in boxing sort of setup that people are getting in the heads. And there is that luxury that you're learning that racecraft if you have a big enough group. And I've actually sort of had a lot of opportunities of high level training groups of plenty of guys that I would have raced alongside that you then carry it in. It's more that come race day, you're reverting back to this is just like a training session. It's just what we do on a daily basis rather than trying to make that switch even mentally or physically that this is a race and we'll have to sort of get up and beat each other. And you find that there's so many dynamics in the top races because there's so many international training groups or different things that people know traits and quirks of other people that that you can use as a benefit. Who's strong, when people might be going. There's guys that from the same country that sort of are comfortable or friendly, but then have all that international mix that people train together and they work together, you work off each other's strengths, and it's either an hour or 2 hours, depending on the race. So there's so much stuff going on that, you have that time to sort of make moves, look around, that there is that draft league element is, you're using each other, but everyone's sort of using it to their own benefit.
What does it take? Because obviously a lot of people we've briefed, we've gone from I could swim well, I went to European Championships. So there's a big jump in terms of, obviously you've got fantastic ability. You put in hours upon hours upon hours in the swim, which has given you a good stead in triathlon. When you talk about your uni years, and we're going to push on to what that led to and qualification timings, etc., what does a week look like when you're looking at triathlon, or the all-inclusive element and being engulfed in it? What is a week of training when you arrived there, when you were back running, when you got that fitness back? How does your week look, and the load that's required?
I guess, a center like that's sort of based around the swimming. Most mornings, you sort of Monday to Saturday, 90 minutes to sort of start off the day. So that's your sort of 6 swims. And probably at the time then it was 4 or 5 bags, 4 or 5 runs a week, and 2 gym sessions. So you're starting, like people say 30-hour training weeks, but you sort of flutter around that 25-hour mark week sort of throughout the season, depending on base phases, sort of a bit more intensity or whatever. And then like even more recently, I guess I was talking to another coach that even for that development, sort of from 18 to sort of under 23 and the senior, that like for triathlon, the amount of hours you're doing is nearly like your age. So those 18-year-olds, if they can sort of crack that 18 hours a week, into your 20s, junior and under 23, around that 20 mark, 20 under 23s going into senior, you sort of at least up to 23 hours a week. And, you're not far wrong, like give or take the sort of phase of the season. And that's really what it looks like. But, it is a combination of, you know, average 5, maybe 6 swims a week, 5 bikes, 5 runs, really.
So, and you add in your 2 gym sessions, you're in around 17 to 19 training sessions a week, which is, people say you go back to your clock, which has the battery being kept up by your mom. It's ticking away, but there's a lot of time in that day and a lot of time to dedicate towards it. As young adults, and those who are younger may listen to this and they'll see you talking about it, to have the maturity, the dedication to get those between 15 and 20 training sessions in a week, depending on what you're training for, and obviously it varies in the stages of training. How difficult is it to go as a young athlete to a university, to a new place? Stirling is a great city in Scotland, but still maintain that discipline, because that is all discipline.
Yeah, I guess swimming definitely ingrained a lot of discipline in me. I guess even my sister had swam through school and sort of followed her into it, sort of 3 years above me, and sort of watching that dedication of, it is just stepping stones. Before that, it's the dedication to sort of do 8 swims a week at a local swim club and manage your sort of be your sort of your leaving certs or your A levels or whatever. Then you're sort of in the university, but you have that sort of 5 years behind you. That you talk to anyone that's came through like a swim club, it's, you know you're swimming in the morning, you're going to school, you're doing homework, sort of either side of stuff, another session in the evening, straight to bed, and you wake up and you do it all again. Um, and it's the fact that, like, I think that's always more impressive to me. Like, even looking back, that I was doing that from 15, 16, 17. That I don't actually know how I was getting up maybe 4:30, 3 mornings a week and going to school and barely staying awake. So the fact that then you come to university, there's a bit more flexibility in class time. for the first time, people are doing the same sport as you, and you're immersed in it. And you know, it's probably when you're talking to a lot of guys on this podcast, it's once you get out the door, it's always easier. And that's the power of the group when it comes to that. And that's what's important in sort of probably that university time, that when there was a group and a center, that there was always someone to get you out the door. It's different if you go to university, you try to do that, and there's always someone trying to take you to the pub.
That-
4:30 is normally come back in the door than anything else.
Yeah.
I'll wake you up on the way home, Russell.
But that's the thing, I probably didn't have the usual first year uni, and to the point that the group that I started with, we were looking at each other and sort of saying, second year we'll find that balance a bit more, because I wasn't running, I hadn't joined the athletics club. You sort of, right, second year, you join the athletics club, you get more of that social side, you have a few more nights out, you do that, but not to the detriment of the training, just to find that balance. But it probably was, you just go in and you're a bit probably too serious sort of that first year. So it didn't have that normal, like I even missed that freshers week for that world champs in 2010. So it didn't even sort of start off of the usual, you go to uni and you just go wild and sort of see what the sort of partying and yeah. And it was sort of like a scholarship type thing, nothing like America, but basically they grouped us together. So I wasn't in halls. We had like basically on Stirling's quite a natural campus, and you've a 5-person wooden chalet. It was just triathletes, so kept us out of trouble. But and I guess just was that little bit easier for keeping the discipline.
Do you, obviously, because when you're operating at such a high level, obviously you're absolute professionals in your first year, second year, striking that balance. For athletes, how hard is it to manage striking the balance? And because everything is on a time and everything is on a rep and everything is on a schedule and everything's about beating how I did the last time, because it's you versus you. You've great camaraderie, but at the end of the day, it's you versus you. Did you have guilt as you moved into the second year to maybe enjoy some elements of it? Is it difficult for athletes at that level to find that balance?
No, I don't think it's too bad. A lot of people say, oh, you sacrifice so much, but if you're loving what you're doing, you're not sacrificing anything.
Yeah.
I've always sort of looked at, you know, I've basically done a full-time hobby. I've started my first job this year and I'm 33.
Not bad.
I can't really say that, I sacrifice too much to travel the world. Riding my bike, turn up to the pool and going running for a living. I haven't made much of a living, but at least, you know, it's been a good balance. And, there's times I've done off seasons, and my cycle club at home, we had a good crop of guys that were more or less racing professionally, and you're coming in, some of they weren't at uni, I'd maybe finished uni, and you're doing bike rides, and it'd be like, we'll finish at the cafe and we'll get lunch, and with no real other responsibilities. And the grannies and all are sitting there and asking, no
You not
jobs, no
you're
school.
not going to work.
Man, it's us, and
You and
like, so
you and Lycra
it's
with a coffee saying, "This is work."
yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's it. Like, we're getting paid for this, so um, so it is a privilege. Like, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like, that first year, I probably talked too lightly that it didn't affect me, but you'll have that dark days of like, I've only started, I'm injured. Like, will I ever make it in this sport? Like, yeah, but when you sort of take that broader picture, we're just playing really, so it's easy to find that balance when you sort of look at it that way.
You came back from that injury then, and you're back in these races and stuff again. How much pressure do you put yourself on race day? Because you're doing like all the amount of training and stuff that goes into it. Is there enormous pressure of, I need to get a certain place to make this worthwhile and everything else?
Yeah, definitely. And it probably was me putting the most pressure. My worst critic, probably not believing in myself enough. at that time, and it probably takes those people and family to sort of be like, you know, keeping your head in it and sort of believing in you, and the fact that, you know, it is an individual sport, but, you know, it takes a team, it takes a village. But yeah, it was all just stepping stones. It definitely got a lot of opportunities. You know, even sort of when I was over there, I do understand that I got a bit more being from Ireland, compared to some of the other countries that, but it was just take it each step at a time, work through the levels, learn your craft. But yes, the it's always more pressure that you put on yourself than anything else. And I wish, like, when I've came this far in my career, I wish I could have told myself that more sort of at that age, that, you know, it is just you that's sort of probably stressing yourself out more, than nobody's really expecting that much. But yeah, it's very personal.
When you have the college experience, you have coaches, you have everything in place, which is fantastic for the development of young athletes. At what point, Russell, did the belief that, you know, if I do the right races, because the qualification system, if I'm wrong, is a little bit complex in certain races, or worth, I believe, certain points for Olympic qualification or world qualifications. At what point in that environment with coaches, with family, did you go, maybe, just maybe we can push here? You've a couple of national champs, you know, you're doing well, you're running well, swimming well, spiking well. At what point did the clock start to ring again in the kitchen and you go, there's the rings, and what can I do? And what were the steps that went in place to go, this is how we're going to do it? And I'm feeling good and we're going to go for a qualification or standard.
I guess the biggest shift of actually, you sort of said at the start, you know, you know, if you see it, you believe it type of thing. And I had the luxury of, when I first went to Stirling, Gavin Noble, who's now sort of chef de mission for Team Ireland, and to the Olympics in London. So I seen his prep. He was at Stirling at the time when I went in first year. And I sort of seen, right, there's an Irish athlete making the games. Aileen Reid, who went to London, was swimming in Lisburn with me at the time, made it to London. And I was starting to, okay, these Irish athletes, you know, they're top of the sport, going to the Olympics. And I went through that university period, graduated in 2015, and probably then you're immersed in that Rio cycle. And I was Brian Keane for on the guys' side, Aileen Reid on the girls' side. I was then their training partner, sort of domestic and Brian in some of the races, doing all the camps. And we just did a small team in Triathlon Ireland. It was basically those three athletes. And I just viewed myself as a training partner. It was never, Rio wasn't on my cards. Just three athletes, a physio, and basically a head coach. Did the camps, trips, altitude, over to Florida for a bit of heat. And I guess it was just watching what Brian and Aileen were doing on a daily basis and on those camps. And I was just having the benefit of just turning myself inside out for them. And probably not believing that I was at that level just yet. And I guess it was always like, right, Gavin and Aileen's went to London, Brian and Aileen are going to Rio, you know, one guy, one girl all the time. And off the back of the altitude in middle of 2016, the Olympic qualification had closed, but I went and then came 11th in World Series in Leeds. And that was just a result that was way above anything I had achieved against people prepping for Rio. And off the back of, and that probably came from doing that daily training with the likes of Brian, going, he's getting ready for Rio. And yes, he was better at the time, but it was like, I'm keeping up. I'm close. You know, there's an Olympic in 4 years' time. It ended up being 5 years later, but it was it was that sort of seeing and believing, and the fact that then off the back of an altitude camp with those guys, that I then was 11th, which is the highest Irish male World Series finish at the time. And I was like, okay, that's what made the switch. And in my whole career, 2016 definitely was a turning point, and it all came from sort of that focus of being a training partner for Rio.
Did you allow yourself some time for that to set in, being the highest Irish finisher on the World Series? Did it? Did you enjoy the moment? Because a lot of athletes don't enjoy the little wins, but obviously it lit the fire for what was to come next.
Yeah, it definitely lit the fire. You know, that sort of gave me so much belief. But it was on the other side. Then you start holding yourself to a higher standard. You know, people sort of say that, like, you know, the reason you sort of get far as an athlete is because you have that drive. But in hindsight, the following year, I went and, like, I loved the Leeds course. It just sort of suited me. But I was 21st at the World Series then in 2017. And I was probably like a miserable git, you know, for dinner afterwards, because I was like, I'm sick. I'm 11th last year. I'm 21. You know, this is going backwards. You know, and I'd do anything for a 21st of the World Series now. You know, I, I didn't then believe how good of a performance that still was. And it is, just looking back, it's like that is the driving force why you get better, because you're not happy with those performances. But at the same time, you're like, you should celebrate those little wins that little bit more, because I can remember looking back, going out for dinner, like my mum had came over, my sister, my first nephew had sort of came down from Scotland and watched physio, and I was probably miserable at dinner that night. And I regret that. But it is, yeah, just in hindsight, I should have celebrated those little wins that little bit more.
Having that 11th in 2016 and 21st in 2017, how long is that 4 year journey? Because part of you could have been like, oh, maybe if I had 11th in 2015, it's only a year to the Olympics kind of thing. That whereas now you're 3 years out from the 2017 going, it's such a long time. It's giving you more time to get back up there, but just to have that patience for 4 years, which end up being five, that is that difficult, or do you have little goals and stuff to keep yourself going through? But the main goal had to be in Tokyo.
Yeah, definitely. But that was the turning point of like, oh, I can do this. And you sort of always knew that it's a 2 year cycle for triathlon for qualification, but in reality, it's a 4 year cycle, because you need to be hitting the ground running. You need to be ranked high enough. There's only World Cups and World Series count, so you can only race the top two highest levels in the sport. So off the back of that, it was like, right, I need points. I need to be on these start lists. I want to race the top guys. So you're 17, 8, 16, 17, you're just banking points. And then qualification opens sort of that May 2018. And it was just a case of belief. And you do just get immersed in it. You're just traveling the world. Like 2018, you know, I'd always worked out I was the most I'd raced or traveled, but I think I'd raced 11 races in a row, 11 races in 10 weekends with relays. Um, the ninth one was my only ever World Cup podium with a silver. I had 54 flights and 2 laps of the world. So that's that. But that year was the reason why I qualified for Tokyo, because probably it put my immune system through the floor, because it's probably the reason I ended up getting diagnosed with Crohn's. So it was a case of it did help, but 2019 just sort of started to dip and slip. But good foundations for that first period of qualification went to plan. But that was the reality of what it took to sort of get there.
Peaks and troughs, and in the same sentence, you're like, yeah, but I got Crohn's. But then, look, I was ready. I was in a good position for qualification. How is it getting news like that after, obviously, you said putting your immune system, 11 races, 10 weekends? Surely it's a big hit along with very good standings. How do you manage that kind of news? And then what does that effect have on your training and preparations?
I guess it's always hindsight. Like, that I'm in the part of my career that I'm looking back and reflecting on all that stuff. So, um, I guess for context, that 2018, I done a race in China near the end of the season, got salmonella, and a couple of other bugs, and went back into Australia. Was just crippled. And then just with the way I was going to the doctor, I'd got 4 antibiotics in 3 weeks to try and hit it. And even with it being a Chinese strain, whether it was antibiotic scarring on the gut or bacterial scarring, but I feel that's where it got sort of the damage that caused the Crohn's. And I didn't really know. I got the diagnosis after the test event in 2019, so nearly the full 2019 season. And I was just frustrated. Things weren't going to plan. I'd probably happy with my career that I had a perfect steady trajectory right up to like a World Cup podium. And then 2019, you're sort of not getting the results. The training's still going well because I was able to manage the training, but the racing was just tipping things over the edge. And I can remember just like rushing to the toilet the night after the test event while having dinner with the team in Tokyo. And, this isn't right. It's not just like normal type of stuff. And there was all that talk about the water quality in Tokyo for like even the sailing, for the open water swimming not being good. And some people had talked about parasites and different stuff. So I was like, something's up. We'll go get checked out. And I guess one of the telltale signs was that inflammatory markers is up for Crohn's or colitis. So then I went and got the diagnosis from there. But I guess naive again, I just never actually realized what toll it was taking on my body or even how sick I was. So like probably even people following my career, or even just not following it enough, even just from a triathlon community, it was probably like Russell's off the boil, no real results, sort of off the back at 18, go to the Olympics, don't really perform, and but I probably was frustrated. I was like, well, I've got here, I'm good enough, I'm qualified, but by the time I was there, I was sick, I was burnt out, and you know, take it, try to push the body through after Tokyo and in summer 2022. I'm in a hospital bed for 16 days and I lost 10 kilos in 9 days. And that's where I was like, okay, I was sick, I was really bad, and that's where it was like, that's the reality, that frustration of 2019 through the pandemic, 2021, that, okay, I went to the Olympics and I probably beat myself up that it was rubbish and sort of my sort of eyes kind of thing. But then since 2022, I was like, right, how I got there, I don't actually know.
You've done probably what we allude to athletes do. You've said, I went to the Olympics, and it was, you breeze over the fact that Tokyo Olympics was somewhere in the middle because you weren't operating at what you felt was your best. There was an illness there, managing it while being a peak Olympian. But let's touch on that for a minute, because there's so many of us that will look at you, and when you wear the team colors and you get paraded around, what is the feeling of getting on a plane to the Olympics? Because in hindsight, you're probably like, yeah, it wasn't right, but at the time, you're probably like, look, it's the Olympics. Something good might come of the day. It might go well. You know, there's issues, but at the same time, it's the Olympics. Anything can happen. What was that feeling like?
Oh, it was amazing, an amazing experience, and you have all the little sort of things that make it so special. The village, the team, the prep camp with all the different sports, everything. But it was different with it being the pandemic. Like, there's no
Yeah,
way that we could look past that. Sort of lack of crowds, no family, and different stuff. And actually, the what was I sat and watched the opening ceremony for Paris, and it was amazing. And you sort of that was actually the first time I was like, that's what I achieved. I was like, these guys, I'm now sitting on my sofa watching the TV, as you say, sort of seeing the guys get paraded out, everything, I'm like, oh, that was or is the level that I got to. And it comes back to probably not being in the moment as much as you probably should be as an athlete. But like the games and stuff, it was amazing. And you know, it is a freak show. You know, you're going around the village, and you know, you have 7 foot Chinese basketball girls and 4 foot
Insane.
gymnasts, and then you've got American skateboarders like completely tattooed up, and you're like, what is this place? So, but yeah, it's an absolute privilege. Like, I guess just the rings everywhere was one thing for me. You know, you're sort of walking out, and to walk, I think with the ranking or it's whatever way it's generated for triathlon, I was number 17. And I walk out onto the pontoon, and there's 55 guys, so you've time to like stand there on the pontoon, and you see like Olympic rings floating in the water, and you're just looking ahead, and you're like, normally you're looking out trying to focus, going right, it's to the first boy, you know, first main target of the race. But when you sort of look up, and there's 5 rings floating in the water, and you know you're wearing brand new Team Ireland tri suit, you know, designed for that day. The guys are basically the top 55 in the world. There is a reality check where you just have to sort of take a deep breath and go like, this is the games, you know, this is everything you sort of work for.
Did your mommy pack your clock?
You know what? It did come with me. Yeah, it was packed.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
But when you were on the start line, obviously you've swam since you're a boy. The first element is the swim. Does that give you confidence? Now there's others. Don't get me wrong. You're 55 of the world's best, and many have probably done that as well. But knowing that that's a strong background for you, and a good, well, obviously an excellent bike and an excellent run. But are you looking at those rings, going, do you know what? This could start well, and then let's see what happened. What goes through your heads in the final seconds before the gun, I suppose, or the horn?
On that day, probably not. I knew I was, and my qualification was pretty brutal after the pandemic opened, and I'd raced, you know, 5 races, 5 weekends in a row across 3 continents, and had about 3 weeks break until going, because I drifted to that edge, and I was probably a bit burnt out. And it probably, although I was sick, it was probably then a lack of confidence going, those races didn't go well, you know. I'm in for a hard one. But you take it back to probably that first race in Athlone, and I was as naive as going, oh well, I'm basically still a swimmer. Like, these guys are triathletes.
We can win this.
Yeah. You dive in, I think I was 7th out of the water, and you're like, junior world, like junior Europeans, it's like, well, these guys can't swim. And then naivety wears off pretty quick in triathlon. So yeah, you got that ebbs and flows through triathlon. You know, there's times where the fact that swimming is the strength, it's sometimes the thing you worry about the most. You know, you stress out going, I flip, well, this is my strength, I need to make it work. And that probably is a crux with a lot of people that sort of swim. When you if you're not the very best, it's always going to come out first. You overthink the swim. But yeah, probably when you hit that purple patch around 2016 to 2018, it's like, yeah, just dive in, swim. You do this all the time. You know, this is you off to a good start. And yeah, that'll set me up for so many races. And it's the old cliche in triathlon of, you know, you can't win this race by the swim, but you can lose it. But it was a case of just using that strength, and when the confidence was there, and when I was happy enough, yeah, it was good to sort of set up those races that you're when I was racing World Series consistently, that you knew you were in that front pack, you knew you were part of the race, bit of TV time, bit of like, well, at least I can even start the run at the front. You know, I'm not chasing up. I don't have time to make up And yeah, it makes your day a whole lot easier.
So hard to come down off an Olympics, I imagine. But given the situation that you were in, you probably didn't feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be here. Like, I'm not 100%, I'm not confident. So maybe you'd already come down before you even got there. But I hope you did enjoy the moment and do look
Oh,
back.
I did. Like I probably talked too negatively about it, but I definitely did. It was still one of the best experiences of my life.
And when you come off that best experience, what was triathlon looking like for you through 22 up until the probably second highlight of your career, the Any Given Run Day podcast?
Yeah, so I guess between now and then, like, um, I probably was a little lost. I'd left the training group, the pandemic had hit, moved back home. Though I was probably the same question I was asking myself, like, what is the next chapter of triathlon? Um, and I guess I was probably a bit pissed off, sad, sort of on race day at the games, and the Irish sort of accommodation block in the village was across the zebra crossing from the food hall. And what you walk across, and I bumped into Alistair Brownlee, who's, London and Rio Olympic gold, and he's drumming up support for the Athlete Olympic Commission. And I think he was sort of annoyed talking to that many people that he's like, I'll talk to someone I sort of know and a friendly enough face. So we just got talking, and I'd sort of said what I've just said, probably a bit lost. I'm at home, don't really know. And he's like, oh, well, we're starting a bit of a separate training group from British Triathlon in Leeds. Feel free to come over if, we need people, kind of thing. I'd race with him plenty enough, I guess. And it probably was like, I've just, what I'd considered one of the worst ever races I've done. And double Olympic champion goes, do you want to still train with me?
Don't come for a swim.
And yeah, and that, I guess that sort of made a shift of like, okay, there's still plenty of triathlon left. Like it pulls you out of the dumps a little. Um, so yeah, I went over, tried the group, and it ended up the past 3 years. Then I've lived and trained in Leeds with that sort of group, and it's just been a bit of a transition period. And I guess I got sick in that 2022 when I first went over, but that sort of I I was in a hospital bed going, this could have retired me. I was looking at different options, and then it just meant that everything off the back of that was a privilege. You know, I sat in that hospital bed and watched the first race of the Paris qualification open, being like, I still want to go to Paris, but I'm in a hospital bed and these guys have started to bank points today. And I look back, it was one of my hardest days. I basically got introduced to surgeons about maybe needing a bag. I'd got an email through that I wasn't going to Birmingham Commonwealth Games from my third games, and I was turning 30 the next day. I thought, this is rock bottom. So I think when I got healthy off the back of that triathlon was a bonus. It probably meant that the last 3 years I probably haven't had the clearest direction, because you're like, I'll still try for Paris, or I want to do a bit of long course, or can I still cut it? And you're sort of managing the illness, or sort of just training. And yeah, it probably has, you talk about the dedication and stuff, and I did have that clear focus of the Olympic Games, and then just managing things off the back. I probably haven't locked in what I actually still want out of triathlon, or what I want out of that it has been a bit fluffy probably since, but it's been amazing sort of off the back of it.
When athletes get older, which baffles me, but when the short game, the Olympic distance, the sprint distance come out, when we get a little bit older, a lot's switched, and you mentioned probably long course. Is it something that'll be in your sights with the likes of the brands of the T100s and Ironmans? You've phenomenal ability, you have a fantastic base, your endurance, your dedication, and to do it over a longer distance. Is it something that interests you? Or you mentioned at the start you've started a new job. I hope it's in triathlon, but it's is it something you've considered? I'm not asking you to tell us your plans now, but even just, is it something that interests you?
Yeah, no, definitely, and especially the likes of that T100. It's sort of that middle ground at the minute between sort of Olympic distance and full distance, and sort of your 70.3s. I have done a few, but the thing is, I probably then haven't been specific enough. I've even kept my name in the hat for, say, a relay team for LA because I'm obsessed with the Olympics. I'm like, well, I'll still, if you need me, I'll try and do my best. Even this year, I still went to European Worlds for Ireland in the relay, and that was probably the highlight of this year. But it did start off the season with a 70.3. So it's like, what are you doing, Russell? You're going from a super sprint to uh, a middle distance. So I haven't locked it in. And I guess then job wise now, I've started as an apprentice coach at the University of Limerick at Triathlon Ireland's High Performance Centre. And it's just getting that balance of coaching. Then I'm based there full time to still be an athlete. And then maybe the people here are all short course, so I'm staying on the road bike a bit more than the TT bike. So it's probably a winter where I need to decide what I want to do.
So let's tease this one out. So before we get into the transition into coaching, which is always amazing to come with a wealth of experience into coaching, what would it take for you if we were to crack open your alarm clock here with rings? What would it take for you to try and get to the LA Games?
I'd have to do another points chase, probably a similar year to 54 flights and 2 laps of the world.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's going to take that
you
much.
know,
It's going to take a huge effort.
yeah, it would take a huge effort because relay wise, even if Ireland were to qualify a relay for LA, which we've never done, it does require all 4 members to be in the top 140 in the world. I wouldn't want to look at where I've slipped, but it probably begins with a 3 or a 4. So that would be the first thing. And then it's probably out of reach then to go out on my own right. Because I'd need enough points to get into like World Cups and World Series again. And so that's asking you to be as close to top 70 in the world to get starts there. And then that's the challenge. That's before you even perform at those. So it is a big ask.
Taking the races out of it, the idea of 54 flights, you said, and traveling the world twice, like, does that even put you off getting on that first flight just from what you've been through, the days in the hospital and all the rest, and losing 10 kilo weight and everything else, the risk of going back towards that? I know LA, the goal and everything else, but just what you've put your body through so far, and then combining that to, I know you had like 5 athletes at the Wells European Triathlon Cup. Did you get any kind of kick off that then, kind of like coaching people through championships, or it's like, I need to get on that bike myself and I need to be in that the sea and stuff myself?
Um, you're there. It definitely it was super enjoyable, and actually, it's something that like you still get a kick being the coach, and that's
Yeah.
something. Yeah, I'd been told, and but it was bigger than I expected. That you can still get that same buzz, and I was probably more nervous, than I was as an athlete, to be honest.
The
Um,
control's taken out of you. It's like
yeah.
it's on them what happens, yeah.
So yeah, but like, don't get me wrong, it's one of those where like I was at this race last year, you know, so I was still doing it, and so it's a bit of a mixed emotions, but definitely the coaching side of that is, if I was in LA as a coach, it's probably just as big a buzz. You're getting you're getting the excitement of everything that build up, race day, apart from probably you'll have an hour before the race going, "I wish this was me," and then 15 minutes before the race, you're glad it's not. Um, and then it's a case. So there's so much more that you can get out of it there, and I think then that's where I would look for my challenges and the involvement in triathlon probably somewhere else, where like middle distance or even just run racing. Like I'm racing cross country at the weekend, and it's probably the most excited I've been for racing in a long time. So um, there's just so many different opportunities, and I guess I'd love to go to multiple Olympics, but I realize that I definitely did it the hard way. And there's that risk that you do all that and then don't go. And that's a big fear. So yeah, there's definitely other things that I'd want to probably tick off.
We don't envy decisions you may have to make over the next couple of months because the cycles come around pretty quick. But in terms of the future of sport in Ireland, obviously we come full circle. We said at the start you could see and you could be when you went across to Stirling. You're now placed in UL. People can see an Olympian. They can see someone who's national champion. They can see someone who's been on 54 flights in God knows how many countries and has really put the best foot forward for triathlon in Ireland. I'm guessing we're in safe hands with the likes of you staying involved in universities in Ireland. Are you seeing a good positive change now with triathlon and more youthful athletes coming through to try and create or emulate the opportunities you had when you were in Stirling?
I guess first of all, like it is great that we've probably got the centre in UL. It was never an option when I was looking for Stirling. It was like there's nothing for me here. Um, and that's kind of like the stage we're at. Um, Definitely have the athletes in Ireland to do that, and it's a case of building enough of that to make it feasible. Like triathlon's probably going through a very big transition phase right now within Triathlon Ireland, and it's just a case of then how we sort of provide that for the athletes, because there's LA hopefuls that sort of maybe aren't in Limerick that need opportunities. So it's a case of how we support them in the short term for LA, how we then probably Limerick is a development and probably a hub for athletes within Ireland. So it's going to be good to be a university where people like me at the age of 18 going, where should I apply? That is the option. Then it's a place of developing more coaches. And the biggest problem within Ireland is actually the lack of triathlon coaches with probably that high level experience, but not even the level experience. I probably more more that they know where the level is.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is such a young sport, especially within Ireland. So it's a case of having the coaches with that knowledge. But yeah, there's plenty of people coming through. So it's a case of then Triathlon Ireland sort of stepping up and us being there for them, and whether that's in UL or across the country. And it is good there is that opportunity, that there is a focus of like, right, we can support Irish athletes in Ireland, and that there is a place for them to train in groups, have that daily training environment, and that we can compete at the highest level in the sport. The fact that yeah, we didn't have anyone at Paris, but we've had one at Beijing and a boy and girl, London, Rio, and Tokyo. So we definitely do punch above our weight, and there's more depth coming through from below that there's ever been. So we're definitely in safe hands.
Russell, the Russell White training systems, training people. I have to try to get into LA to try and get some training with you, Russell. There's no point otherwise, right? I know you say for all levels, Russell, but you're going to whatever, and I can't even swim. For someone listening though, that's not me. That it would be interesting training. How do they get coaching and stuff through someone with the shit ton of experience that you have?
I find that when I started, I was like, people were like, yeah, you probably don't
I'm not
want to be
trying
coached by me.
Yeah, just because you're such a high level, it's intimidating, right? It has to be.
But that's actually, I get the enjoyment out of coaching anyone basically, because even being involved in UL, it's like you're trying to coach people who have that aspiration for the Olympics down the line. But you know, there's just as much from someone being able to finish their first park run or getting into the pool for, 1,000 meters eventually, kind of thing. And so it's open for that, and the fact that it's so rewarding for me that yes, I've been to that point, but that's not what I'm trying to cater for. And it's nice that you sort of like you're sitting down on training peaks and you're training, putting training plans, and you could be populating a week with 20 plus hours for someone. But even just getting someone to do 3 things a week, 5 things a week is just as cool. And it's those are nearly the catch ups and the phone calls and the messages that are probably even more enjoyable and more rewarding, that their little wins are actually a hell of a lot bigger. And they're the type of people that actually appreciate, like the mindset that I had of like, 11th one year, 21 the next year, that shit. Whereas you get someone, you know, that really does just appreciate being able to see massive improvements, and just by having a focus and accountability, and someone actually just taking the time to teach them little things I probably took for granted, that some of the things I've sort of absorbed over a career are a given for nearly everyone, and it's really not the case. So, it's brought me on even trying to simplify things, trying to bring it to all levels, because that's a challenge in itself. So it develops me at the same time.
You haven't tried to train Sean Russell. If you want him after training the untrainable, you should give Sean a run for 6 weeks.
Do you do training with someone who has armbands on, Russell? Because otherwise I'm out. Russell, it's an absolutely fantastic listen to your story. I just got the amount of accolades I have in front of me that you've done, like 12 European Championships, 2 Commonwealth Games. We didn't even touch on your other national championships in 2002, 3, 4, and 5, coming back from being in the hospital, Crohn's disease, and still dealing with that. Absolutely phenomenal what you've done. And I enjoyed listening to over the last hour of the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on.
No worries. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
And that is it for this week's episode of the Any Given One Day podcast with myself, Russell, and Eric. Take care.